In the world of commercial real estate, many of us are looking for those markets where there is growth. We look at where people are moving to. Where is there affordable housing? Where are the jobs? Where is the growth industry? But today, we're going to look across America with a different kind of lens. We're going to talk about innovation. We're looking at university-anchored innovation districts. So from Stanford Research Park in California to Kendall Square in Boston, my guest today analyzed 18 of these university-anchored innovation districts. And the one thing they found in their analysis, office and retail properties in university innovation districts have lower vacancy and higher rents. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. And today we have two innovation expert guests joining us. Welcome, both of you. We've got Emily Crutcher, who's Associate Director, VP, Public Institutions at JLL. Welcome, Emily.
Hey.
And Emily, you're joining us from Charlotte, right?
Yeah, coming from Charlotte.
Okay.
Every morning.
Excellent. And also from my research world at JLL, we've got Elsa Wilson. Elsa, you're Senior Research Analyst at JLL. Now, you're from LA, but today you're joining us from Nashville.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks for having me, James, in Nashville for the day. Excited to be with you guys.
So in Nashville for work or pleasure?
So I'm actually from Nashville originally, grew up in Nashville. So here visiting family, but live in LA, work in LA full time.
So we're talking about university innovation districts. And I sort of had like a sense of what that was, but then I started reading your report, and your report is very specific. So how do you define a university anchored innovation district?
You're right. They're pretty diverse, but I think we've really begun to define university-anchored innovation districts as these defined geographic places that foster innovation, creativity, collaboration, and they're doing that amongst researchers, company executives, and company researchers. But usually there's a very high concentration of academic medical centers, research institutions that may be affiliated with that university. But then what we find is there's a high concentration of startups and spinouts that are coming from that university ecosystem. There are incubators and accelerators that are helping those startups grow. We have the corporate partners at the table as well. And more, we're finding that there are small-scale biomanufacturing companies that are co-locating to be able to draft off of the overall innovation ecosystem.
So it's not every university town. We're talking about science, technology, medicine, bioscience. That's like where the hot spot is, right?
Exactly. But these places, these innovation districts, they really only come to life when the scientific elements are supported with really robust activation and placemaking. And so that means having other types of uses like retail, like hotels, and maybe recreational amenities. So all of these come together to really foster a more robust innovation ecosystem.
Does a university plan for these, or do they grow organically?
Oh, great question, James. They are absolutely planned. They do not. They are not ad hoc. And what we really see is that the development of these innovation ecosystems often take decades. So just thinking about Kendall Square, right? Everyone knows it as the powerhouse it is today, but that is because of decades of commitment from successive university administrations, successive researchers, from MIT and Harvard.
Okay, well, cool. We'll talk more about Kendall Square in a minute. I want to dig into that, as I think that'd be a great case study. So let's talk about rents, though, and other metrics, real estate metrics we like to talk about. these buildings in these districts, they like outperform, right? They do higher rents, lower vacancy, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, James. I mean, we started this process with a thesis that we wanted to prove out. Our thought was, the way that Emily mentioned, these innovation districts, they're a convergence of academic research excellence, diverse funding, strategic partnerships with the public and private sector. And because of that, there's a unique value proposition that we thought would lead to these areas to outperform. And the data shows exactly that. Whether you're comparing office or retail, looking at the local market benchmarks or national benchmarks, innovation districts outperform. So we looked specifically at the submarket level, looking where this innovation district is located, trying to get as focused as possible. And with that, we found that these innovation district submarkets, vacancy rates are about 220 basis points lower in the office sector, and direct office rents command a 10% rent premium compared to national benchmarks. If you look at those mature innovation districts, so those are the ones that Emily mentioned, like Kendall Square, that have been forming and growing for decades, those command actually a 36% rent premium compared to national office rents. Yeah.
Wow.
So there's a huge difference there. These areas are really outperforming. And then if you even just looked at the local market, those submarkets command a 26% office rent premium in the market they're in. So in Kendall Square, that's looking at Cambridge compared to broader Boston. Retail is the same story. There's a 28% rent premium there at the retail level. So, we were very excited. Our thesis was proved out even more than we could have imagined, which is great. But yeah, these areas are doing really well from a real estate metric perspective.
Would you consider, from an investor's standpoint, or in my world, maybe like a retailer as occupier standpoint, would you consider these areas to be more stable, like more consistent? Because it feels like there's always new people coming in, new grad students, new professor. I don't know. Like, is there a consistency there that you wouldn't find in other places?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I think the anchored is kind of the key word of this research, right? University anchored innovation districts. Despite all the changes that happen at universities, new professors, new students, the demand is consistent because of the university. So yeah, I absolutely think that's kind of the draw from the investor angle is universities, public institutions generally tend to provide stability from an investor perspective. And these innovation districts are a clear example of that.
And I think maybe to add to what Elsa said, innovation districts are also at their heart economic development engines, because the startups and spinouts that are coming from the university research and coming from the sponsored research that the universities are doing with their corporate partners, they are creating jobs. They are looking forward into economies of the future, right? And so these economic development engines, which are the university anchored innovation districts, they also have attracted the interest of state and local economic development agencies that see them as a place where it's creating something larger than the sum of its parts.
So you've got the university, you've got the student, and then the other thing too is there's all these startups that always pop up around these innovation districts. So venture capital, I imagine, is going to play a big role in and around them. How did you look at that?
Yeah, so I'll pick up and then maybe Elsa can weigh in too. The attraction of venture capital to these innovation districts really helps prove out the commercialization of some of these startups and spinouts. And so, the universities, they also have a lot of intellectual property and royalties and licensing revenue that they drive from their inventions. But really, once the venture capital is attracted, we know that there's a concept that can really be commercialized. And that's what gets a lot of these researchers excited, right? Like they've discovered something that's going to change the world, but they need to get it out there to the world, right? And venture capital is a critical piece in that puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we looked at the data, we found that these districts, again, tended to have higher venture capital funding amounts compared to the rest of the market that they're in. I think it's, Emily alluded to it, it's this proximity to research and talent. Most of these university anchored innovation districts are top research institutions in the country. And because of that, students are always generating new ideas, new startups. And so VC kind of, it's drawn to that. And because of that, these areas have really high levels of VC funding.
So for your analysis, you looked at 18 different university anchored innovation districts across the US. And I would guess different districts have maybe a different specialty, I guess is the way you put it. How are they different? What makes them distinct from each other?
I can start us off, and then Emily, I'll pass it over to you. But you said it, James. We examined 18 innovation districts. So those 18 districts are anchored by 25 different higher education institutions across the United States. So it's not a one-to-one there. Kendall Square is anchored by MIT and Harvard. Some of them, they work together to create this collaborative ecosystem. But in that analysis, we included, both those mature, well-established ecosystems. So you can think Stanford Research Park, you can think Kendall Square, as well as those more emerging innovation districts like in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Innovation District is anchored by Carnegie Mellon and the University of Pittsburgh. Or Towerside Innovation is one that's coming up right now in Minneapolis, anchored by the University of Minnesota. So they're all distinct. They all have different focuses from a research perspective, and they're all kind of at different stages of development, but all performing very well.
As we think about what is that focus for research, we call those centers of excellence. So as we looked at these innovation districts across the country, we looked at a lot of different centers of excellence, from an university anchored innovation district that might be focused on ag tech or vet med, through to one that focused on life sciences and bioengineering. We've also really looked at mechanical engineering and advanced mobility, digital futures, and cybersecurity, right? So it's not just about life sciences, although that does make up a lot of the maybe more mature, innovation districts that we looked at.
Do the universities themselves, I assume, they're where they decide to focus their research dollars and all of that, that's going to dictate what their center of excellence is. Is that something that comes out over decades, or is it something like they say, hey, we want to be a center of excellence for medicine or something?
You follow the federal R&D funding, right, to determine what their center of excellence is. You also look at the commercial activity that they generate with starts and spinouts, and looking at what types of corporate partners that they attract. So, for example, an ag tech and vet med innovation district might be partnering with John Deere and Bayer on issues of, what does the tractor of the future look like? What are the seeds of the future? Whereas a life sciences innovation district might be co-located with an academic medical center. In terms of how universities dictate those centers of excellence, it's really built on decades of excellence in talent attraction and retention, because generations of researchers and principal investigators build upon the work of their colleagues. So,
yeah, and
that's what we've witnessed.
I would just add too, Emily mentioned the federal funding, and you kind of follow that, and I think. Traditionally, when people think about federal research funding, they probably think about the National Science Foundation, NSF, that's where it's come from. But for a lot of these universities, they're receiving funding not just from NSF, but from the DHS, Health and Human Services, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, NASA, Agriculture. It's a really diverse base of federal funding. And a lot of that can dictate the research and the excellence, to Emily's point. But I think, to the resilience piece, it is the diversified nature of the funding that makes these innovation districts so strong. It's the federal funding, the VC funding, state and local government funding, nonprofit, private sector. It's a really diverse group of investors that want to fuel this innovation ecosystem. And so that's where a lot of that sort of strength comes from.
So let's dig into a case study. We started talking about Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Let's dig into that more. So that's MIT and Harvard. That's the number one, right? We could say that. That's probably like depending on what metric, you guys had in your report, you had like number of Nobel Prizes. That was clearly the winner there. Like, tell us a little bit more about Kendall Square.
Yeah, I mean, I can start us off from kind of a numbers perspective and then pass it over to Emily. I think you're right. James, Kendall Square is kind of the winner here. It's the densest collection of biotech research in the world. It's where these leading companies, whether they're established or innovators in the area, it's where they want to be. So it's the biotech. It's what you think of. It's also traditional tech, Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, Google. They all have a place here. And I think too, the universities, they fuel a lot of this. About 70% of students from both Harvard and MIT are graduate students. They're working directly in these fields, directly with these companies, and I think that's a lot of the reason that they've been able to be so successful. And like Emily said, they've been around for a long time, and they've had time to develop into what they are today.
Okay, so Kendall Square, let's keep it going. Up next, Pittsburgh. I'm from Pennsylvania, but I'm from the other side. Pittsburgh, Pitt, CMU. That's another big one, right?
It's another big one. Its focus is a little bit different than Kendall Square, to your point earlier. So Carnegie Mellon and the National Robotics Engineering Center are really what's driving the growth in Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh has this reputation of being the birthplace of AI, and it's got the Global Robotics Center. And so that attracts, again, a certain type of student, a certain type of investor, a certain type of company. That's really driving that growth in Pittsburgh.
What kinds of amenities do people who go here for work or for school, what do they expect? Is there more shopping, office amenities, that type of thing than you would get in a typical, mixed use environment?
Within innovation ecosystems, you want the ground floor plane, meaning the retail experience, to be just as entrepreneurial as what's happening up in the wet labs and the robotics labs, right? So supporting entrepreneurs that maybe opening their own restaurant or a new coffee shop is really important for the merchandising mix, because you begin to lose a lot of that creativity at the ground floor plane if you have a lot of national retailers. So again, we tend to see startups in the retail space as well.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah, now that I think about it, you go to a university town, you see much more creative, often independent, restaurants and boutiques that totally fit in with that atmosphere. Now, just from what I know around retail real estate, if it's not a big national chain, it's usually not as plug and play. It requires a lot more effort and money and time from the owner. So I'm assuming that the owners of these properties are willing to put into that extra effort to bring in these innovative concepts.
Yeah, no, you're right. They definitely have to underwrite them differently, because it's maybe not going to be the same credit worthiness as a national retailer. Local startup retailers might also not have the capital to do fit outs. So tenant fit out packages may need to be structured differently. So as we've worked with innovation district clients around the country, we're really encouraging to think through those types of things. And also as they're planning, to allow for spaces for collaboration and for activation and programming. So for example, we're working with George Mason University on their Fuse at Mason Square project, and they had an existing plaza which they connected the new building into so that they could have things like outdoor yoga on Wednesdays, for example. They could have, a pop-up, like they just had a pop-up food market.
That's really cool. So you're thinking about it. You're thinking about programming this space. You've got to have stuff going on, yoga, different events, food, cool boutiques. So it really, it's not just when you're using the term innovation, I'm learning now, it's not just about the scientific innovation, but it's about being innovative, in the retail space and the office space. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, and with your hospitality product or with your multifamily
Oh,
product, right? If you think about some of the innovation districts around the country, they often have long stay hotels because they may have researchers coming in for a project and they need to be there for a month or 2 months. Um, same with the multifamily. It's just a different type of product because again, you've attracted um, a different type of talent to these university anchored innovation districts.
okay. Well, let's move on to our final case study, which is, it's funny. I said, oh, hey, Cambridge Kendall Square is number one, but I think that Stanford probably gets more brain share around the world than any other place. People are talking more about Stanford innovation because they're always, I don't know, for whatever reason, it's captured the zeitgeist. Talk a little bit about that district.
Yeah, I mean it's true. We certainly can't count Stanford out, and I think the research park and the university has this reputation of innovation, and it's certainly well earned. The research park itself actually has some guidelines to ensure that only high tech users can occupy the space. They've reached this point in their development where they can be very particular about what companies are driving that growth and what researchers are occupying that space. Um, and yeah, they've certainly earned it. The park itself, Stanford Research Park, is located just southeast of Stanford University. It's over 700 acres. They have, I think, about 140, 145 buildings dedicated specifically to high tech research. So the infrastructure has been invested in, and it's there to help drive this growth.
And all of these innovation districts, you'd all call these like public-private partnerships, or is it really just like, talk me through that? Like this campus, for example, is this all owned by the university, or are there outside investors? How's that work?
So there are a lot of different models for university anchored innovation districts. What we probably see most frequently is the university owns the ground and then they enter into long term ground leases with developers and investors who then own the improvements, own and operate the improvements. But there are a lot of different models out there, but I think those public private partnerships are what we see most frequently.
So we talked about some of the greatest hits of innovation districts, and you also talk about emerging ones in your report. What's an interesting emerging district we could talk about?
Oh, great question, James. So, as we were looking across the country at the emerging innovation districts, one that we examined was Arizona State University. They have a very wide and deep research base. They have a lot of different centers of excellence, and so they have created smaller innovation districts around each of those centers of excellence that aren't in one particular geographic district. But the one that we focused on and looked at was Macro Technology Works. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, it's an innovation district that is specifically focused on the semiconductor industry. And so we know, like, given the CHIPS Act, there's been, and it's importance to national security. Um, the semiconductor industry has really uh, grown in its scale over the last few years, and Arizona State is really driving that growth. So I think that's one that we would point to. So again, not life sciences, but semiconductors, and a really important um, industry right now in the U.S.
I think one thing that I just want to call out and has come to mind as we've been talking is there's certainly a symbiotic relationship with all the parties involved here. So there's been a lot of conversation over the past few years about declines in higher education. Enrollment is declining. There's budget challenges for universities. And that's certainly true. But, I think we found that student attraction and retention is a big part of the conversation, and innovation districts can help with that. Arizona State is a good example of one that's growing, but we looked at these innovation district universities, and while national enrollment over the past 10 years has declined by about 1.5%, At our subset of 25 universities, enrollment grew by almost 17% at the undergraduate level. Master's degree completions also grew by about 34% compared to 24% nationally. And so, all these amenities and things that we've been talking about and centers of excellence that are open to students, whether they be undergraduate or graduates, they're helping the universities as well. And so I think we're going to see more of these start to pop up as schools try to be creative and innovative with their space and look to generate new revenue streams and help attract that talent.
Okay, so you conducted this analysis of all of these innovation districts, and we talked about some of the findings, but we're business people, so these need to be actionable, right? So what would you hope that a reader of your study would act upon after reading the research?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and there always need to be some actionable takeaways. And my hope would be that after this conversation, people would take away that no matter what role you play in the commercial real estate industry, there's likely some relevance here for you. And we tried to outline that in our report. So at the end of our report, we have a section on what does this mean for investors, occupiers, and then higher education leaders and public sector officials, because there's certainly relevance there. So, whether that's from the investor perspective, you should be targeting those talent-dense submarkets because they are pockets of growth. Or for occupiers, leverage some of these partnership opportunities that are out there. And then for public sector officials, how can you connect that campus in your city to your community? How can you create this ecosystem that benefits all? So the report kind of outlines it depending on your role. But I think the takeaway here is that, this is relevant to everyone.
And since this is a retail show, I'll put a little retail button on it. Just from what I've learned from both of you today, if I were a retailer that I was trying to start up a unique, new, interesting concept, it sounds like if it's an innovative retail concept or a restaurant or something like that, being at one of these university-anchored districts might make a lot of sense, because you might find the landlord who's more excited about your concept, about trying something new. And you also find a lot of consumers who are interested in trying something new as well. So that's my little retail take on your report.
Well, and that made me think of something, James. So another university-anchored innovation district that we work with is NC State University and their Centennial campus. And one of the startups in the retail space that came out of Centennial was a company called 321 Coffee. Look them up. And if you can get a bag of their beans, order it. But they're a specialty coffee roasting and coffee shop, but they specifically employ individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities. And so it is, to go into their coffee shop on Centennial campus, it's just a super cool experience. So again, as I said earlier, right, it's about supporting entrepreneurs at the ground floor plane and up in the labs, right? That's what really activates and engages these places.
I love it. 321 Coffee. I'm going to check it out. Oh, okay. One final fun question for each of you. Of all of the districts that you've studied or been to or worked on, what's your favorite? Do you have a favorite?
Oh my gosh. It's a good question. I'm not a parent, but I imagine it's like asking to pick a favorite child. If I had to.
Yes. Yeah.
If I had to guess.
Or favorites.
Love them all for
maybe
different reasons.
Favorites.
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's like asking you to pick your favorite vacation destination. I say, on which continent? So
yeah.
Right. There you go.
We're just,
well, is
they're
there
so
one
different, James, all these innovation ecosystems, because of their centers of excellence around research, because of how they connect into their local communities. They're all so different. So it is very hard to pick a favorite.
Well, are there any other, I just loved that coffee example. Are there any other fun retail examples we can talk about?
Yeah. Another one that's coming to mind is Tata Bakery at Kendall Square. I want to make sure I'm getting the story right, but it was, I believe, an Israeli woman and her husband who moved to the United States. She really was homesick And so she began to bake out of her home kitchen. And all of her friends were encouraging her, saying, these pastries taste amazing. You should start up a shop. And she has grown from there to, I would say, probably 10, 15 locations from Boston down to DC, if not more widespread.
There's a ton now. Like DC, there's a ton, and now they're expanding in Manhattan and New York. So yeah, that's such a great example of an innovative concept that's really started to catch on in the Northeast, and I love it. That's a great one. I had shakshuka. Is that how you pronounce it there?
Their shakshuka is amazing. Yeah.
It was really good. What a great example. So these innovation districts, these are retail and restaurant incubators as well. Right. That's so cool. Oh, wow. Well, thank you both for joining me today. This has been a fascinating conversation. Oh, and folks, Elsa, they can download this report,
absolutely.
Right?
The report is published on JLL.com. If you just search University Anchored Innovation Districts, it should pop right up and available for download.
And it is totally worth a read. Thank you so much to both of you today.
Thank you, James.
Thanks, James.
And if you like this podcast, do me a favor, go into the app you're listening to and give us a rating. Even better, give us a little review, write a sentence, something that you liked about the show. You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app or on Spotify. Wherever you get your podcast, just search for Where We Buy, and we're on the web at wherewebuy.show. If you've got a specific question about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, feel free to connect and message with me on LinkedIn. Just search for James Cook, JLL. And our theme music is Run in the Night by the Good Lords under Creative Commons license. All right, that's a wrap.